Ladies and gentlemen, this is Bongani Shiva of Walk Tall with Shiva, the show that seeks to inspire and motivate others. Today's episode is going to be talking about suicide in Swaziland. We have themed it suicide. Your story is not over yet. We want to explore how does it affect the Swazis? How do we get to suicide? Who is likely to commit suicide? And what can we do when we realize that a person that we know, a family member, a friend, a loved one, is having suicidal thoughts? This is Bongani Shiva of Walk Tall with Shiva. Right about now, we have our panelists with us here at the Mountain Inn Library. I'm going to introduce to you Ms. Senele Mdluli, who is a psychologist, and she will introduce herself to us a little later. And we do have Pastor Mandla Mandlazi, who will also introduce himself to us. And then from there, we're going to start getting deeper into the topic of suicide in the Kingdom of Eswatini. Senele, hi.
Hello.
How are you doing? Welcome to Walk Tall with Shiva.
It's nice to be here.
Thank you very much. You are a psychologist.
Yes, I am a counseling psychologist.
Counseling psychologist. What is a counseling psychologist?
Well, so basically, psychology is a broad field, and then people tend to specialize as they do pursue their postgraduate. And I specialize in counseling psychologist, and that's generally concerned with the assessment, diagnosis, and treatment of varied psychological disorders, but also broadening a lot around intervening with people who have life challenges, also conducting assessments, working in communities, and generally working across people across the development, the life developmental stages.
Okay, and you're a lecturer as well.
Yes, I'm a lecturer and I'm a therapist also in private practice.
You've got a private practice, which I suppose is going to be very good for us because you probably have had to deal with people who have gotten to depression up to a point of having suicidal thoughts. And maybe you can help us unpack how we get there. But before we do that, we also have with us Pastor Mandla Mandlazi.
I studied at Christian Life Center for many years. I've been a youth pastor, went to college, graduated with a degree in theology, Bible and theology from Global University, Missouri. And now I'm pastoring a church outside the Christian Life Center.
All right, and may be able to shed light into how we get to the point of deciding to take our lives, and maybe a discussion, an in-depth understanding as to how religion can be used to make a person feel like they can stop and allow their life to continue. Yes?
When Jesus came to the world, he didn't only come to save our souls, he came also to talk about social ills of the world. As a pastor, I've counseled a lot of young people, a lot of old people with social issues, and also we believe that there's a spiritual side of a man. Apart from the mental side, there's a spiritual side.
And that's exactly what I love about today, is the fact that we have two different types of understanding how the brain works, the spiritual side and the psychological side, or rather the mental side. This is Walk Tall with Shiva. There is a rise generally in suicides in Swaziland. Would you say that this is because of social ills in the country or a lack of understanding of our life? Why is there such a rise?
When we see an incidence of something that's happening, we have to, as a society, and it's also part of our role as psychologists, to say, why do we have an increase in this kind of human behavior? And I think then we need to look at the society and the social conditions that people are living in that might be predisposing them to be more vulnerable to wanting to carry out certain actions. And then we look at the difficulties in terms of, generally an under-resourced mental health country. There's not a lot when people have issues, when people have difficulties, when people have challenges. There's not a lot of places that they can access easily. There's not a lot of mental health professionals in this country. We only have one psychiatrist in the country. We have, I think, not a lot of psychologists either. I'm sure we can count ourselves probably under 20.
Senator, I want, for the benefit of the people like myself, the lay people, I would like to understand the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist before we move on forward. You don't have to get into the nitty-gritties, but just a small.
Okay, so a psychiatrist is a medical doctor who then specializes in the mind and the brain, right? So their focus is more on the medical treatment of mental disorders. And a psychologist is someone who's not a medical doctor, but has a postgraduate, typically a master's or a PhD in psychology in a particular area of specialization, and they focus on the psychological, so that's more the behavioral and emotional treatment of psychological disorders.
Thank you very much. And then you have said that, again, we do not have enough resources in the mental health field in Swaziland. So then what can we say we're going to do to be able to fix this?
We can sit and say, okay, this is the challenges. And I think just to add on to the social conditions, we also need to think about the things that are happening in terms of poverty, in terms of child-headed homes. Those are the social conditions, our sexual and gender-based violence, all of those things that predispose people to mental health disorders, which make people most likely to be susceptible to disorders that might make them more vulnerable to commit suicide. And I think in terms of that, there's a responsibility that we have to sensitize people about certain symptoms, about certain things that this is a normal way of feeling. Maybe this is not normal. Maybe this is when you should seek help. This is where you can go for help if you're feeling this way. Maybe there are options before you should actually take your life. And maybe you are still feeling this way because you haven't accessed those options. Or maybe you're not aware that how you're feeling that it's actually not a normal way of being. And so we need to also create awareness about mental health, about suicide in our country, because I think part of it, and it's before we even start interventions and people need medication and people need treatment, we just need to start with raising awareness, and people must know.
And speaking of awareness, Mfundisi.
Yes, sir.
The church, she mentioned about where before you decide to take your own life, the church is very much against taking a life, even if it's your own. But the church cannot hide from the fact that these things are happening. She is talking about the fact that the medical side, or at least the mental health side, has not been developed so well. However, the church side is very well developed. What sensitization, what awareness has been created in such a way that outside of the sin, the actual help to say do not get to the sin, how has the church been able to make that awareness for the people outside of providing the counseling itself?
A nation has different kind of people. You have Muslims, you have Hindus, you have people that don't believe, you have atheists. All these people are affected by suicide. So as a church, what is that we can do? So I believe that this is the time, especially in Swaziland, that the church must come together. We find ways on how we can reach out to these people that are suffering from these ills. Because in our side, we find that in most of the churches will say, these are demons. These people are demon possessed. And that's why they're committing suicide.
The terms mental health then make us feel that we are going to be termed mad people for having gotten to a point of depression such that you thought of taking your own life. These are all things that are happening. These are all words, these are all titles, these are all labels that we have. For instance, I would not want to be seen as a person in my church as a person that is possessed by demons. In my social circles, I do not want to be an embarrassment or a failure or a weakling. In the medical side, I don't want to be seen as a madman. How are we going to manage this?
So when we think of mental health, maybe people expect happiness and perfection, and that's not what it is. But mental health is being able to cope with your life challenges and your life stresses, and having enough resources within you and outside of you, a system that supports you to cope with the difficulties, to be able to hold the positive and the negative in your life. And maybe when people stop thinking, maybe imagining mental, it's, that if you're unwell, it means that there's something wrong with you, because sometimes there's nothing wrong with you. Sometimes what you are feeling is a normal response to the difficulties that are in your external environment.
We do not talk about our problems to the people. Similarly, in the church, talking to the priest means that I am now exposing myself. These are other real problems that the myths you're talking about that need to be unpacked. It's still very difficult for me to go and see somebody to talk about my problems. How are you encouraging, or is there a system in Swaziland? Where can we go to make sure that this particular myths are not, the taboos are not so much of a taboo that people can still make it work? If I go to the church, the one answer I'm going to get is pray. But the prayer is not helping right now. I still am seeing the vision of whatever it is traumatic experience I experienced. Real practical solutions.
For instance, we talk about Swaziland. Essentially, you know what I mean? Like, you find the child is being abused in the house, and the child can't tell the mother, can't tell anybody else, because the auntie told them, maybe, if you do this, I'll kill you, or do this, I'll do that. And also sometimes you find that there are those brave kids or brave women who can come out and say, you know what, I'm being abused. But at the same time, you find that the family itself, they say, no, let's just keep it in the house, let's forgive each other and everything else. And you find most of the time when these things happen, you find that the abuse continues. And this leads at the end that the person will resolve that, you know what, the best thing to do is for me to do what? To kill myself and just get out of this place, because you find that the home has become hell for that child. You find also in the church, you find that pastors, because, I'm sorry to say that, but because of money, you know what I mean? Because of money, we tend to hide stuff. Like maybe a child comes to me and say, I'm being abused. And after being abused, I approach the victim and the person that is abusing the child, and I'm saying, this is not good. The person will say, no, Pastor, let's talk. And then the person is like, Pastor, I will give you 50,000. Let's just forget about this. And these things are happening in the church. Right? You find that these victims are now sidelined because of money issues. Now I tend to protect that person. Two, you find that the same person that is abusing the child has a position in the church. So now that child is not feeling safe at home, is not feeling safe at church. I get what I'm saying. So now it becomes a problem now for the child now to start speaking until we deal with these cultural issues of children should not talk and women should beware and all those things. We won't find a solution to these suicides.
It turns out men are more likely to succeed. Is that how it is? More likely to succeed to commit suicide than women. Can you unpack that for me?
Okay, so we see in our statistics that women are three times more likely actually than men to attempt suicide, but men tend to succeed better. Statistics show us that men succeed at suicide because they tend to employ more violent methods of killing themselves. So they're more likely to succeed because of that. So we find that the hanging yourself, or maybe shooting yourself, chances are usually men do that, the more violent acts of suicide. And women, it's more, it tends to be maybe overdosing on medication.
Why would it be such that men would want to commit suicide?
I think men...
Now we were talking about children who are abused. That makes sense. That's a traumatic situation. Men
also, it's because of pressure, life's pressure. Like, for instance, you have to provide for your family. There are people looking up to you, and you find that at the end of the day, you can't take it anymore. Especially when you can't provide. And you and I, we know that, when you come home, the woman is expecting you to bring butter and bread. And if you can't bring those things, and you're looking at the children...
We live in a different world now. Wife and husband work together. Wife earns more money sometimes. Wife can bring the bread and butter. Why are we failing to work with that?
That's another thing that you need to understand. Whether the woman brings butter, whether she brings butter in the house, whatever, it's an inbuilt thing that God puts in every man, that you should be a provider. Even if the woman provides, even if the woman has more salary than you have that thing in you that you have to provide. So now, if you are not meeting your responsibilities. That pressure comes on you. You feel less of a man, number one. So if I feel less of a man, it means I don't belong to this society. So what else can I do? Let me just escape. Because really, suicide is a form of escape. Yet we are saying we are escaping, but no, we are not. But I'm escaping this thing. I know my wife is here, and also in the society, people will know that, hey, this one is not even working. Look at him. He's dressed like that. That suit is the wife that bought for him. So all those things, they come on me. It becomes pressure. You know what I mean? So for me to come out of that is for me just to kill myself, because now I feel like I failed.